Hello, YouTubers. Anyway, today is kind of a rant and a question that was asked to me many times, and I'm just now getting to answering it, so I apologize, but the last few months, as you regular viewers would know, it's been a kind of crazy for Kathy and I. So I'm here now to address that question. And I'm going to tell you the good, the bad, and the ugly of it. So this is related to my heart attack that I had the last of April. People were asking me, you know, what was it like, or how were you treated? And, well, a lot of you, I guess, kind of knew what went on because Kathy was keeping everybody up to date worldwide with the videos. While I was incapacitated, is probably the best word that I could use. So we had a lot of people say, you know, well, what's it like? And again, so that's what this is going to be about. We've had people call from pretty well all over the world, and people complaining from all over the world saying, you know, like, the treatment that you've received is basically, you know, terrible. Well, that's really kind of not true. So I just want to set that straight as well. So let's go back to the end of April. To make a long story short, I had 2 heart attacks, one within 2 hours of each other. I ended up at Carbonear General Hospital. And here in Newfoundland, we live on the island of Newfoundland. There's Newfoundland and then there's Labrador. That's all one big province. And it's a very big province with a population probably around 550,000 if I remember correctly, if I have my stats right. And we have one cath lab, one lab that takes care of any repairing of the heart or any procedures that has to be done with the heart. So that's where the problem starts. But anyway, I ended up in Carbonear General Hospital, which is down the road, probably 20 kilometers or so. And anyway, when I got in there, sure enough, ended up into ER, and they were trying to stabilize me, and which they did. Now, first of all, I have to tell you, Carbonear General Hospital probably has the most professional people working there that I've personally ever ran into in my life. I mean, I can remember lying down in the bed, and I can remember doctors and nurses going around, and they were hardly even talking to each other, but they absolutely knew what each one was doing. You know, when you're working with somebody and you've been working for them that long, or working with them that long, and you just know that they know what they're doing and you know what you're doing, you hardly need to talk. Well, that's the way it was down there. I felt so comfortable. They just absolutely knew what they were doing. So I have absolutely no complaints about the Carbonear General Hospital or the people that work in there. If God forbid, if I ever had another heart attack, I wouldn't think twice. I'd have to go back there. You know, it would be the place of my choice, to be honest with you. So anyway, that was on a Friday. So Saturday morning, they had me stabilized, and I was in ICU, and I was hooked up to this, that, and everything else. And the doctor came in. Great doctor. Been down there a long time, certainly knew his stuff. And he pulled his chair up next to me, and we had a little chat. And I said to him, well, Doc, what's next? And he said, well, Paul, you really need to see a specialist now at the cath lab in St. John's. And he said, we really just keeping you stabilized until we find out what's next. And he said, you'll have to go get that dye test. So I said, okay, no problem. I said, well, when is the dye test? Now, what Doc didn't know was I was up all night in ICU, awake, checking stuff out on the iPad. I like doing my homework. And he said, well, you know, Paul, it could take 2, 3, maybe 4 weeks to get in there. So I said, well, what happens to me in 3 or 4 weeks? 2 or 3 or 4 weeks? He said, oh, you have to stay right here. I said, well, Doc, that's not going to happen. He said, well, if you go home, you could die. I said, well, you know what? I'm going to die because I'm not staying here for 4 weeks. So, because I said, I have a small business. I said, I've been in business for 22 years, and in 22 years, I never had one sick day. And I'm going to tell you, we put in a pile of hours out here, my wife and I. And he said, well, that's all we can do. He said, we're trying to change it, but we could never get it changed. So I said, well, that's a pretty bad situation to find yourself in. But it's even worse for the patient, because I said, Doc, it's kind of the industry standard to have that dye test within 90 minutes of a heart attack. And he looked at me and he said, yeah, it's true. So I said, well, Doc, the government have to realize that they're keeping a productive person from working and keeping them in here for 3 or 4 weeks in a bed that's tied up by somebody who could easily probably be put back in service fairly quick. So it just don't make sense. He said, well, it's the way it is. He said, how it works here, he said, is we get people together in St. John's and they triage. We know how many people are out there with this problem. We know how many people are out there waiting in rooms, in hospital rooms, and they decide the most serious ones first. Well, it's like I told him, I said, well, Doc, you and I both realize that Newfoundland has the highest rate of heart disease in Canada, if not the highest, one of the highest. And there's no catching up to this, because, like last night, probably 2 or 3 more came in, which, by the way, did with heart attacks. So I said, it's like a bottleneck. There's only so many going to get through the bottleneck, but then it just starts to back up where you never catch up. So you have all of these hospital rooms and hospital beds being occupied by people who are just basically sitting around breathing and eating hospital food till they can get in to get this test done. So my wife Kathy started to do some YouTube videos and putting it up on YouTube, and of course we have a pretty good following. And people who've been with us, viewers have been with us a long time, and they stretch out from all over the globe. We've had comments from Iraq, from South Africa, from New Zealand, from many, many people from the UK, and even Australia. So they're spread out everywhere. And we got a good scope on how these countries, these provinces, these states, because the U.S., we have a big following in the U.S., and we found out, they basically said that we're treated like third-class citizens. So Kathy ended up calling our MHA, which is Pam Parsons, and Pam was the kindest person. She called back right away. She was very concerned. And I mean, to this day, I'll never forget, how she handled this for us. And she was very caring. And it's like I said to Kathy, I said, even if I get in quicker, this is not going to stop my fight for trying to get this problem rectified, this bottleneck eliminated. So anyway, to make a long story shorter, 6 days later, I end up into the cath lab. And when I go in, again, the most professional group of people that you would ever want to meet. It's incredible how these people work. And they work hard. Boy, I'm going to tell you, did they ever work hard. The problem is they only work so many hours per day, and it's not open on the weekends unless it's an emergency, from what I understand. So again, the bottleneck, that's where it's to. The bottleneck is caused by 2 problems, the way I see it. We have this cath lab on one end of the island, but it has to service all parts of Newfoundland and Labrador. Even some places so far away that they have to medevac them into this cath lab. And I'm thinking, my God, man, how much is this costing? And how many people are out occupying beds when they could be available for other patients, for other complaints, and getting people like me back into the workforce. Anyway, when I got in there, I got a pretty good scope on what was going on, and I had some people, not mentioning any names, that told me what was needed. And basically they need more manpower. They need more people in there, and they need longer hours. And I agree, because we are never going to catch up with the backlog of heart patients if we don't get rid of this bottleneck. It's ridiculous. People are literally dying in hospitals because they're waiting to get this test. Because technically, none of us know what's wrong with us until we get this test, and that's including the doctors and the nurses and whoever, the specialists. They don't know what's wrong with us just because we need this dye test. So anyway, I got the test done. They looked after me, they put a stent in my heart. I came home, and I had to rest for 6 to 8 weeks. During my resting period, I'm watching the evening news, and we have our transportation minister up in front of the cameras, and he is ecstatic how he's made changes to the motor vehicle registration department on how fast he can get the lineup shortened so that people can get their new registration on their vehicles and their new stickers or their new tags or their new plates so they can go on and go on with their life. He said he do not want people waiting in lineups for too long so they can get on with their life. People have busy lives, he said, and I'm thinking, no friggin' kidding, buddy. What do you think about all the patients that's waiting to get this dye test? Now, a little note to government. We have a premier who is a druggist by trade. We have a health minister who's a general practitioner for a career. Okay? Now, you would think those people would have enough sensitivity and enough sense, to be honest with you, to say, this is not right. We need to change this before we change anything with the motor vehicle registration department. My God, people, what is wrong with you? You know, it just goes to show you can have education, but it's no damn good to you if you don't have common sense. Isn't a human life worth more than somebody waiting an hour in a lineup at a motor vehicle registration department? You're keeping productive people out of the workforce by doing what you're doing. You're keeping beds tied up. You're keeping people who need medical assistance from getting into the hospital because people like me are lying in the bed waiting for this test. It's ridiculous. Now, I wanted to make an issue of this in the House of Assembly. So what Kathy did is she got hold of Steve Kent's office. Now, Steve Kent is the opposition leader, or opposition and critic for the Department of Health. Okay? He's the health critic. Well, that was a total waste of time, because Steve, the mouthpiece that he is, and I got to say it because they're all talk when they're opposition, but when they're in power, you can't hear a word out of them. And the problem is with us, we keep recycling the same parties, conservative liberals, and I'm telling you, one is as bad as the other. Anyway, what did Steve Kent's office say? Well, you know, we can't bring it up in the House of Assembly unless you have a petition. We need a petition signed. Well, so Kathy said, well, okay, we'll get you the information, you do it, the petition, send it to us, and we'll get it done. Kathy made 2 or 3 calls in the Steve Kent's office, and the secretary never, ever, ever did send us out a petition. Now, why? See, the whole system is breaking down. It's just terrible. So it's become such a frustrating part of this, and I didn't even know this existed. I mean, who would think that you would have to wait up to 40 days to get a dye test that should only take maybe half an hour to an hour, and then see how you need to go proceed with your treatment. You have to remember too, psychologically, when you're lying in that bed and you're in there for so long, you're wondering, you're wondering if you're going to lose your business, you're going to wonder if you'll lose your car, you're going to wonder if it's a mother, how's her family coping? If it's a father, how's he going to cope with the family? There's a lot of scenarios out there when you keep people pretty well locked up, under lock and key, up to 40 days to get this lab test done. This is crazy. So what I'm asking everybody to do who watches this video is to take a few minutes, if you can, and just write a short email to the Minister of Health and to the Premier's office and say that you want longer hours at the cath lab in St. John's, or a separate cath lab, say at the new hospital in Cornerbrook would even help. But I'd like to see some kind of commitment from government to get this thing straightened away, because this is never going to get any better. I mean, face it, one cath lab for 550,000 people from all over the province, and plus we are leaders in health disease, in heart disease in Canada. So I mean, it's not going to get any better. It's going to get a lot worse before it gets any better. Forget about your friggin' motor vehicle registration department in there and their lineups. Shorten the lineups at your hospitals, because that's where the money is. That's where we're paying big bucks. And as a taxpayer, I don't want to see my money being wasted. So this is what we need. I will put the links in the video description. So if you could, please send an email to their office. And to all Newfoundlanders, look, you might be sitting back saying, well, that's never going to happen to me. I'm never going to have a heart attack. Well, you're looking at a guy here that never took a pill in his life until the last of April. And I can tell you, I'm taking them now. And I mean, I never had a sick day in 22 years. So you think about it. It can happen to anybody. And heart disease is not in my... So it can happen. And if it don't happen to you, it's going to happen to your cousin. It's going to happen to your sister, your brother, your mother, your father. It could happen to anybody. And do you want to be visiting them in that hospital for up to 40 days? And God only knows, possibly longer. There's people have died in hospitals waiting for this dye test that probably and most likely could have been saved if they had to get in within the first 90 minutes. Now, I don't even know if the first 90 minutes is even possible. But look, you know friggin' well it's got to be able to be done, shorter than 40 days. So let's all get together as Newfoundlanders and even the world and put some pressure on this friggin' government. These politicians are supposed to be working for us, not us for them. This is a real problem, and politicians now are starting to get this all mixed up in their head. They figure that they're doing us a favor by being there. Listen, folks, you guys aren't doing us any favor. You're killing us. And when you start making decisions about how long they should wait in lineups to get their license plates, over and above how long it takes to go in and get a dye test, there's something physically and mentally wrong up there with you when you start thinking like that. And start triaging your policies instead of triaging what patients get in to see the doctors in St. John's first. Now that's what I'm going to tell you. And that's what I mean. And this is not going to stop. I'm going to keep going until we see some results. Anyway, folks, I'm going to put the links in the description. And also, if you have any experience in the medical field, and you're in another state or another province or even another country, can you put in the comments, how a heart attack victim is treated in your area? That way, our politicians can read it and say, you know what, we really need to step up our game. We really do. And this is what I'm hoping for. So if we don't start being active about this, nothing is ever going to be done. Well, I don't plan on dropping the ball here. So just because I'm fixed right now, I'm still going to continue. And that's another thing. In other countries and other provinces, they have follow-ups. Now, when I left that cath lab in there, came back to the hospital, they released me the next day. So I said, well, okay, what happens? Well, you got to talk to your general practitioner now. So I go to my general practitioner and say, okay, doc, what's next? Do I have to go back for another EKG in another month? No. She said, that's it. You don't need any more checkups. I said, well, is there any cardiac, rehabilitation? No, we don't do that here. I think that's ridiculous. Again, you go home, what happens if the stent collapses? Or I don't know. So anyway, again, folks, if you have any experience at this, please put it in the comment section. I would love to be able to read this, and I'm sure our politicians will too. So to all our followers, and to all our viewers, and to all the people who followed me through this episode of heart attacks and everything else, from the bottom of my heart, I truly appreciate everything that you've done. It's because of you, truly is, that I've healed so well, because I knew you had my back when I was down. So let's see if we can continue and make a difference to this cause. So with that, you guys take care. God bless.